Hey guys, how you doing today? It's Payman. I'd like to go through a bunch of GRE text completions to show you how the test makers think. Let's get started.
The first thing I'd like to talk about is creativity. If you have a lot of it, don't use it on the GRE. Imagination can work against you. Stay in the context of the sentence and look at the sentence as a whole and pick the words that complete the sentence and do nothing else. The protocol at the Herman Foundation for Cancer Therapy allows untested treatments to be used on patients only when blank therapies are not available. Okay, so the sentence is saying that there are certain standards at the Herman Foundation that will not allow them to use treatments that have not been tested unless the therapy is what? What do we want? We want some kind of therapy that is proven, which means provable is not a choice because that would be something that we would have to prove. It can't be many because we'd really only need one good therapy that is proven. We don't need many of them. It can't be futuristic because that is totally away from the point of the sentence. And it certainly can't be experimental because if it was experimental, then it wouldn't be reliable. We don't know if it's going to work. Conventional is the only answer that works. And in this context, conventional means within the norm, standard, traditional. All of those would work just fine. Now here's something that happens to me naturally now that I've worked with sentence completions for a while. I automatically see the main words of the sentence, the words that I really need to understand to get the meaning quickly. Now it doesn't matter whether you call these words the target or whether you call them the lead. It's not important. The point is you want to understand the meaning of the sentence as a whole as quickly as possible and choose words that follow the flow. Whatever works for you, learn it and do it. Whether you need to eliminate words, whether you like to read the whole sentence, everyone is different. Test out a couple different methods and find what works for you. It's time to look at some difficult examples. Hit pause if you want to and make a selection before I continue. Before the end of the decade, new technologies now available will uncover whether some forms of breast cancer can be eradicated or not, blanking the initial blank among oncologists about the eradication of certain tumors found in the breast. Okay, so we need to understand the sentence very quickly. We know that in a very short period of time, technologies that are available now, and we're in the flow of the sentence, technologies that are available now will help us figure out whether we can get rid of breast cancer. That's what eradicated means, to get rid of. Blanking the initial blank among oncologists or cancer doctors about the eradication of certain tumors found in the breast. Okay, now here's what you can do. If you choose rendering or extrapolating, rendering is simply saying that you are portraying. And that doesn't follow the flow of the sentence because the flow of the sentence is implying that something is happening now with the doctors. They may be having a conversation. Rendering just says portraying, but doesn't really tell us what is being portrayed. And extrapolating implies that we are looking at something in the future. We are projecting something based on the information that we currently have. That is wrong. Something is happening where the oncologists are thinking. Now it makes sense that they may be forestalling because they may have disagreements. And since they have disagreements, they want to hold off arguing about this until the new technologies uncover the truth. That makes a makes a sentence completely understandable. By forestalling, the conclusion will eventually be shown by the new technologies, so there's nothing really left to argue about. I mean, it takes so many years to discover new treatments for cancer. If oncologists can save their reputation by not arguing for a few years, they'll wait. It's logical, it's not creative, it is what happens in the real world, and it's practical. Okay, let's look at another difficult example. Hit pause and make your selections. The blank of Johnson's stance was always blanked by his pattern of abandoning his initial position when he refused to sign agreements he first agreed to. So Johnson starts with a position, and then by the end, he flip-flops. He changes it. So we know he starts with something that would appear to be his viewpoint, and then by the end, he no longer has that viewpoint. So what is he really doing? He's contradicting himself, right? So for the second blank, it can't be increased because he's not increasing anything. And it can't be emphasized because he's not emphasizing. He's flip-flopping. The only one that makes sense is betrayed. And betrayed here is used in a very American, I live in the United States and I understand what this word means sort of way. If you're an international student, it may be a little more confusing for you. But betrayed can mean contradicted. What was contradicted? Well, the strength of his stance, how firm he was, how much he believed in what he was saying is contradicted. Let's stick in a couple substitutes that are similar to our selections and see what it sounds like. The strength of Johnson's stance was always contradicted by his pattern of abandoning his initial position when he refused to sign agreements he first agreed to sign. That makes sense. Does it make sense to say the logic of Johnson's stance was always contradicted by his pattern of abandoning his initial position when he refused to sign agreements? No, that doesn't make sense because logic isn't really being changed. It's his point of view, his position that is being changed. The firmness of Johnson's stance was always betrayed by his pattern of abandoning his initial position when he refused. That makes sense. Okay guys, stay with me here. This problem is of moderate difficulty. Hit pause and make your selection. Gossip, mixed with half-truths, can ruin the lives of many people and become accepted as reality by intelligent people who are generally not prone to blank. Okay, so the key theme here is that intelligent people who are generally not prone to. What are intelligent people generally not prone to? They're generally not prone to being fooled, right? They're not naive. They're usually smart. Clearly that is what the sentence is saying. That's the main point. Now we can't put in thought because we certainly wouldn't say that intelligent people are generally not prone to thinking. That doesn't make sense. Stubbornness doesn't make sense. And insight is too close to thought. Doesn't make sense. Defiance is away from the flow of the sentence. Credulity, hopefully you know what that means, is someone who is easily fooled. That is the correct choice. Intelligent people who are generally not prone to being fooled. This is another difficult example. Hit pause and choose. Unable to be blanked by the idea that the earth was designed by a specific magical being, most modern thinkers will rely on scientific blank to recreate the lost piece previously found only in worshiping a deity. we quickly see that this sentence has an emotional tone, which means we are probably going to need to select an emotional word. Unable to be blanked by the idea that the earth was designed by a magical being. Don't you think that most people want to feel better after believing in God or a higher power? Obviously, marginalized doesn't fit, because marginalized means that the people are going to feel worse. They're going to make themselves feel less important. That doesn't make sense. And they're certainly not going to be prevented. They're not going to choose to believe in something that prevents them from feeling better. They want to assuage their feelings. They want to be relaxed or calmed, pacified, placated in some sense. The only choice that makes sense is assuaged. That fits the first blank. Now for the second blank, it's a little more tricky. Most modern thinkers will rely on scientific. Now descriptions and considerations can kind of make sense, but this is the trick. You want to choose an option that fits the sentence best. And substitutes works best because people will look for the quickest way to feel better. They would much rather have a substitute. Modern thinkers would much rather have a substitute to get that feeling that God gives them back, rather than a description or a consideration which only lends them a possibility. They want the substitute. It feels better. Let's keep going with the difficult examples until my brain explodes. Hit pause and choose. A man cannot be credited with scruples if he merely lacks the fortitude to be blank. In this situation, proper behavior is the result of blank. Okay, the sentence is implying that a man cannot be credited with good behavior if he merely lacks the fortitude or courage to be blank. It's clearly implying the opposite. It leads us to the opposite here. So we know it's got to be bad behavior that goes in that blank. The only choice for the first blank is indecent, which means bad behavior. Vacuous means empty or without, and intrepid means bold, gutsy, audacious. Wrong. Indecent goes in the first blank. For the second blank, in this situation, proper behavior is the result of mimicry, which is copying, doesn't follow the flow of the sentence. Incorrigibility, which means someone that is difficult to lead, intractable, no. Indolence, which means lazy, someone that doesn't put the effort in, makes sense. The person doesn't have the gumption, the attitude, or the energy to be indecent. Whether or not you agree with the value of the statements, it doesn't matter. The flow tells us the answers. Here we go with another difficult one. Hit pause. In science fiction movies, the battle between the wicked and the righteous is almost always depicted as a blank between monsters that are blank and human beings who are blank. 3 words here. Now we have a big clue, and sometimes longer sentences give you more clues. Notice that we read between the wicked and the righteous. We are going to need to use wicked and righteous again, replaced in the second blank and the third blank, the exact same meaning, because it is between monsters that are evil or wicked and human beings who are good or righteous. So let's select for the second and third blank words that fit. Monsters that are villainous or evil. That's the only choice that works. Efficacious makes no sense because efficacious means capable of being done, effective. For the final blank, it's got to be virtuous because human beings are always, or generally speaking, seen as the good guys when there are monsters. Now for the first blank, it's clear that there's a battle going on. It's certainly not parallelism, because parallelism would imply things are happening side by side, and it's not synthesis, which implies a symbiotic or mutually beneficial relationship. No, it's a battle. It's gotta be a conflict. In science fiction movies, the battle between the wicked and the righteous is almost always depicted as a conflict between monsters that are evil or villainous and human beings who are virtuous or good. That is the perfect fit. Hey guys, I know this is the most fun you've ever had in your life. Stick with me. Hit pause and choose. Despite some physicists' position that the blank specificity in mathematics is more objective than the emotional and subjective language of psychology, the basic nature of physics, like other sciences, is certainly blanked by fallible human thought. Okay, wow, that's a long, goofy sentence. But what you get right away is, again, the tone stating that physicists are susceptible to some of the same things that psychologists are susceptible to. They're not perfect. That's implied in the sentence. So we need to look for words that limit how physicists think. Okay, so for the first blank, despite some physicists' position that the blank specificity in mathematics, so they're claiming something very deep about mathematics that makes it objective, factual, okay? The only word that makes sense there is something built in, or integral, or part of mathematics that cannot be changed. Magnificent doesn't make sense because that just means wonderful, too ambiguous. And rampant has a negative connotation. It means things are springing up and it generally isn't good. They're coming up everywhere, proliferating in a negative sort of way. Inherent means deep, integral, or a firm or strong constitution. That word works, inherent. Now for the second blank, the basic nature of physics, like other sciences, is certainly, what are we getting at? We want to say that physicists don't think perfectly, right? So they're not emancipated, which means they are made free, and they're not harnessed, which means that they are gathering or taking something under their wing, under their control. Restricted is the right word, because it implies that they are limited by human thought. They are not perfect. The correct choices must be inherent and restricted. Just 2 more to go. Make your choice, guys. Okay, in the past 20 years, the idea that a rudimentary form of empiricism was founded by Plato has been caught in the blank between scientists who believe that science is fundamentally different from philosophy and philosophers who blank the contributions of men like Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so there's clearly something going on between scientists and philosophers. A disagreement of some sort? A difference of opinion? Now, for the first blank, we can clearly see that analysis is too general. It's not an analysis, it's a conclusion or a disagreement of some sort that these two parties have already had. And a capitulation implies that they've given up, or one party has given up, and they clearly haven't. Crossfire is the only word that works, because crossfire implies a disagreement or a battle of some sort. Now for the second blank, fundamentally different from philosophy and philosophers who Now, the word we need to put in there is to tout, or to believe in, or to promote, to espouse. The only choice is trumpet. And for those of you that are foreign students, this is tricky, because trumpet isn't just what you blow in and play music with. It can imply that you take a position and you stand by it. Now, you know that it can't be enchant, because enchant is to garner some sort of magical force or to become enamored. That doesn't fit. Describe means to simply explain. Too far away from the main flow of the sentence. Last one, my friends. Pick your answer. Any communication technique is an affront to freedom in the sense that it is a systematic attempt to blank spoken language by separating it into individual units. Now, there's a big clue here, and the clue is the word freedom. What does freedom allow us to do? It allows us to go outside, to do things we want to do. If freedom is taken away, what happens? There is control, or somebody running the show, telling us what to do. Any communication technique is an attack or an affront to freedom in the sense that it is a systematic attempt to obliterate, to destroy spoken language? No. Elucidate, to make language more clear? No. Depict, which simply means to portray or show language? No. And to extrapolate, which means to draw a conclusion above and beyond what you already have? No. Engineer is the only word that works. And we're not talking about an engineer in terms of a job, but an engineer in the sense that somebody is creating and doing something or making decisions that you, in this case, don't necessarily want to see happening. The flow of the sentence tells us the answer. And guess what, guys? We're all done. Hope you learned something practical from this video. Good luck with your studies.